So.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for having me. I gave this talk once before, and I gave it to the FileMaker research group. And I should just keep an eye on the time here, make sure that I stick to the plan. But so that was, this is a talk about this product I've developed called ConnEDCt, which is a mobile electronic data capture tool that I built with FileMaker. And so the talk that I gave to the FileMaker research group, which is a group on the Claris community these days, you know, they are all very much into research using FileMaker. We're more of a broad-based group, so I'm going to try to adapt this talk to a broader audience, less of a deep dive into clinical research than I had originally done. But I will go into clinical research somewhat to talk about some of the specific challenges about developing in a regulated environment and that sort of thing. And also we'll talk about how, well, just clinical projects in general. So I would encourage anybody who has questions to, I guess, post it in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself and interrupt me, that's fine. If you have any questions, if I'm going down a road that you're not familiar with about clinical research, please feel free to interrupt me, okay? So let's get started then. So, so this is who I am. 20 years in computer information systems. I've really spent a lot of that time working in clinical related fields, including healthcare and research. I have a Bachelor of Science in Design, and I am nearly done. I am in the 11th hour of a master's degree in computer information systems with a focus on health informatics at Boston University. My thesis is in the final stages of review with my advisor right now, so I hope to be wrapping that up pretty soon. And I'm published. I have 3 academic publications. One of them I'm the primary author on, and 2 others I'm a co-author on, which are all about electronic data capture. We were talking a bit about where I live. So I live in Doha, Qatar, and this is actually country next door. This is Abu Dhabi, and pretty much you're asking where I can go to camp. Well, pretty much this is kind of what it looks like when I go camping. The difference is here I get to camp on the beach in the dunes on the seaside, which is pretty nice. But on this particular trip, we were way out in the middle of nowhere in an area called the Empty Quarter, which is a pretty interesting place if you want to Google it. So, well, before we kick off, I want to tell you a little bit about the format of what we'll talk about today. I want to talk about my personal history with electronic data capture with FileMaker. It starts in 1997. I want to talk about a little bit about what I did back then, a little bit about what I've done in the meantime, and then we'll do a demo. I'll show you the tool in its current state, and then we'll do some follow-up specifically about challenges. So I'll do an overview of what clinical data capture is, this demo, and then on the iPad, which I have here with me, and then just some of the specific challenges that you encounter in the regulated environment and, you know, with FileMaker in general deploying on iPads. So I first got involved with clinical systems around 1997 with the Traumatic Brain Injury Survey, which was sponsored by the Brain Trauma Foundation. And what this was this multi-year, multi-country epidemiological survey of head trauma in Central Europe. So it covered 11 countries through this sort of vertical north-south axis from Estonia down to Slovenia. And it was a study to prove the efficacy of the guidelines for treatment of severe head injury. And the way I got into this, as a lot of us do, is some other developers had tried to build a system in another technology, and they were really struggling to accomplish this inside the time frame and the budget, specifically the time frame. Spent a lot of money on a system where they were trying to install a web server on a laptop with a client installed as well, and then some way to get that data back from Eastern Europe to New York City. And so I happened to know a guy who knew a guy, and they asked me to come in and see what I could do. So these other guys took about 3 months and hadn't produced much of anything. The client, the Brain Trauma Foundation, was kind of in a panic at that point. So I turned it around in about two or 3 weeks. I turned around a full system that did more better than the system that they'd paid, you know, oodles of money on. They spent most of their budget on that. Unfortunately, I didn't get much. But what I did get was 3 years of traveling around, a three-year engagement with these people, traveling to Central Europe and working on this data capture project. So what we did, again, the idea is capturing data in a clinical environment based on observations by physicians of patients who had suffered severe traumatic brain injury. And the idea was collecting evidence to back up the idea of a particular treatment protocol or discover, you know, a better treatment protocol. But the idea was which treatment protocols work for this kind of injury. And so we deployed them on laptops. This is long before tablet computers. The successes were that it took a very short time to develop and deploy. We had it mobile in the sense that laptops are mobile, and we accomplished near real-time data access because this was before, this was actually after FileMaker could do web publishing, but it was before we had anything like the data API or even the XML API. Actually, it was before, I believe it was before the XML API was available. So we transmitted this data on a daily basis of new and modified data as an export that was then emailed from Central Europe to New York. And so that was one of the challenges. The other challenge was getting updates when things needed to change, getting updates deployed to the field. And then, of course, regulations didn't really exist. So we were in this kind of legal gray area. Well, it wasn't really a legal gray area, but it was really uncharted territory because people were doing this kind of work, but regulations hadn't caught up. So we were definitely on the cutting edge in that sense that we were breaking new ground in terms of collecting clinical data in a database and that sort of thing. Today, you know, you can't email this sort of patient data. We developed a series of related systems to this TBIS, the Traumatic Brain Injury Survey, including something we called CT Web. Everything was called something web back then, so we called this CT Web. When you have a brain injury, you come in with a head injury. They're going to give you a CT scan, most likely, to check out your head, right? And back in those days, most of the output was not digital from these machines. CT by definition is computed tomography, so it's digital by definition, but the output, normally a film printer was built into the machine and they would spit out a film. You wouldn't get the digital output. So we would scan the films using a transparency adapter on a flatbed scanner, while the research fellows in their Central European hospitals would scan the films, digitize them that way, and then upload them through CT Web so that in New York, they could do quality control on the readings of the CT scans or CAT scans, if you will. And so that was a related solution that I built for them. And then eventually we evolved TBIS. FileMaker really struggled with things like deployment of updates, and also the idea of syncing data or replicating data. these are two things Lotus Notes had baked into it just by design. And so TBIS version 2, we developed in Lotus Notes. We went away from FileMaker. But I have to say, FileMaker really allowed us to develop an elegant solution, which is shown here on the left. This is a screen. It's a listing of patients, and where you have a mark in this grid, it's showing that a form was filled out. So you have an admission form, an ambulance form, a form for CT scans, a form for surgeries, and then daily forms that the clinical research fellows would complete. And each of those was represented by a record and a table. And you can see, basic navigation and that sort of thing. So that was what we did back 20 years ago, right? So today, what I have is something that I could say is sort of an evolution of what I had built originally 20 years ago. And right now, ConnEDCt, which is the name of it, in real life, is deployed right now for 6 multi-year studies on 3 continents, 4 studies in India, 1 in Uganda, and 1 in Ecuador. And so I kind of like this, I don't know, makes me feel good to see that this is being used all across the world. I visited the African study and the Indian studies. I went there to help train the research assistants and make any last minute changes. Study in Ecuador is pretty simple, and couldn't convince them to fly me there for that one. But I was lucky enough to go to Uganda and India for the deployment of those studies. So what changed between 20 years for mobile electronic data capture? Well, so now we have a regulated environment. HIPAA was passed in the US, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, which basically covers securing, data security and privacy for protected health information, which includes any personally identifiable information that's collected about you or submitted by you for any reason. There are very strict controls about who has access to that and what is done with that data. So that has actually really made my life easier in a sense, because it gives us a pathway that we have to follow, right? We have, so let's see, actually, this is a list of the goals that we had for ConnEDCt. And again, this was developed in collaboration initially with Cornell University. So we established these goals for a particular study that they were about to embark on. And the result was a framework that can be used for, pretty much, for any clinical research project, really. So the goals were to be compliant with the regulations that exist. And again, so HIPAA is a US regulation, obviously. However, you'll find that worldwide, countries will either follow HIPAA or they'll have their own regulations that are extremely close to HIPAA. HIPAA is probably the most consumer-friendly regulation we have in terms of data security. The US has very little in terms of privacy regulations for data. Credit card companies share our personal data all the time, right? And marketing companies share it, Facebook, right? However, health-related information is very, very controlled and regulated. So we can thank the HIPAA Act for that. Offline use, we need to be able to, there are actually plenty of electronic data capture solutions which work on the web, but very, very few that work offline. And so this is why I got the call in the first place, because they needed to do this in rural India. They needed to do this in Ecuador. And these are places where the internet is not necessarily so reliable. And so we needed offline use, we needed to be able to sync, and we needed to be able to use it on, well, our goal was to be able to use it on phones, tablets, as well as laptops. In addition, we wanted some advanced features to be supported. So longitudinal schemas are a common thing in clinical studies, meaning that you would have a long time frame that you're collecting this data for. So you might be collecting data for a month or 6 months, a year, or multiple years. And in this case, as I mentioned, actually all of these studies were multi-year studies. And so that longitudinal schema defines which forms, which data is collected on over which time points. There are always eligibility criteria for which participants are going to be included. Are they within a certain age range? Do they have certain health conditions? Are they, what sex are they, male or female? And so eligibility is something that is really critical for determining whether they're going to be included, but at the same time, it may be a complex list of eligibility criteria. So this is something that automating it in the database was really desirable to do. Also, randomization. These are all things that that oftentimes, certainly in the old days with paper-based data capture, these would just be manually done, and they would be done by different members of the team. So you might have eligibility criteria written down, and you might have to refer to that list if you're going to, whether you're going to include this participant or not. Randomization, you would actually send your list back to maybe a statistician who would generate this randomization list to be assigning the different study arms. And so automating these things, even though there are lots of other electronic data capture or EDC tools, they don't always include these features. And so you might still be offloading these features outside the system. So we wanted to automate them and include them all in one framework. And then, of course, scheduling CRFs based on that longitudinal schema. And then a couple other interesting, not always used, but very valuable features to have are randomized serial sampling and randomized subsets. I can talk a little bit more about those if you like, but basically the idea is presenting certain forms only under certain conditions. So I just want to show you a little bit what a study schema looks like, and then we'll have a demo of this tool, and then we can talk more about some of the detailed challenges that FileMaker presents. So this is a form schedule. This is basically a study schema. Study protocol is a document that covers all the aspects of the study, including who the team members are, your goal of who you're recruiting, who the IRB might be. The study protocol is this gigantic document that defines everything about the study. The form or the study schema is, all right, what forms, what visits are we going to meet them on, and what forms are we going to present to them on these particular meetings. So I call it the form schedule here, but study schema is the technical term in a clinical context. So what we have is a list of forms on the left. They're called CRFs. CRF stands for case report form. It's just what the clinical researchers call it in that industry. And so, for example, pre-screening form, consent form, appointment cards, these are the ones on the left-hand side. So this, you can see this study has quite a few forms. It has like 25 forms or something like that. So very complicated to organize in paper, which is, actually still the way the majority of clinical research is still done on paper to this day, interestingly enough. So this is why it's an attractive market for me to be, attempting to corner, right? Or at least, cover a certain niche within that market. So very difficult to organize that number of CRFs on paper. But of course, when we have the schedule that we can automate, pretty easy, and also makes it a lot easier for training people, because you don't have to rely on them to remember which form to present if you can have the data presented to them. So we see along the top, horizontally, we see the definition of the visits. So number one is a screening visit, number two is a baseline visit. And then 1 month later, we have a follow-up, and then we have follow-ups through the first year, and then there's finally an end line at the end. And so this is the basic idea of a longitudinal study protocol. So the only thing really to mention here is that there is a legend at the bottom. So these dark gray boxes represent when a form is required at a certain visit. The blue box is, again, one of those randomized serial subsets, which is basically when you're choosing a subset of the participant pool and you're presenting them with one special form. So not every single participant will get that form, only a subset, but that subset is randomized so that you're not showing a bias one way or the other. Randomization is always intended to reduce bias so that you're not selecting, so that no person is selecting a particular participant to receive a special treatment. And that goes along with the study arms also. In a randomized controlled trial, you would be randomizing the participants to assign them to different treatment arms. So that might be 2 arms where you would have, in a typical double-blinded study, you might have a controlled study group and then a trial study group. So in the case of the COVID vaccine development that's happening right now, they're in phase 3 trials for the Pfizer's in this phase 3 state for their vaccine trial, which is a safety trial. But at every step along the way, they're doing well, presumably the highest caliber of study is a double-blinded randomized controlled trial. That means that the study participant doesn't know whether the shot they're getting is a vaccine or a placebo, and neither does the clinician. So it's blinded in both ways. Really, the only person who knows is, well, at the end when an analysis is done. But of course, somebody needs to know. Normally, that would be a guy like me who's coding these things into the database, because I will know that study group A is the control and study group B is the trial arm. And you can have multiple trial arms. You might have 2 or you might have 4. It really depends on what sort of specificity you want to test for. So you might be testing different doses, right? So you might have 3 interventional arms, each with different doses, to see which of those is most efficacious. So the red box is, again, randomized serial sample, another type of randomization. We can get into that later if you have questions about it. But suffice to say, another determination of when a certain participant would receive a particular form or not on that particular point. And then we have forms that are not mandatory, but are maybe completed if necessary. So adverse event, if there's a drug reaction, something like that, you can manually choose to create that form. Okay, so everybody ready for a demo?
Yes.
Let me,
Yes, indeed.
Open. Are there any questions so far? Okay.
No, but it's impressive.
I'm going to launch the solution on the iPad, so just give me 1 moment, please.
Caleb, it's great to see this and where you've taken it. It was a number of years ago that we looked at it together, and so it's great work, very clear, clean.
Thanks, Albert. Okay, so let's see. I need to switch this over. Let me get out of full screen here. Let's see. I'm going to, sorry, bear with me just a moment. Okay, I have the iPad up on my screen now. I just need to switch over to use that. Let's see, Barry, do I stop? Maybe do I stop sharing? New share. Oh, here we go. So I think,
I believe you stop sharing the current screen and then choose the iPad as a choice.
Right.
here we go. Okay, tell me if you see an iPad.
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
Okay, great. Okay. So let's see, we're at 9:30. Barry, what's my end time?
Like 12:15, or excuse me, not 12:15, 11:15.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's 9:30 p.m. Okay, so 45 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I will probably only talk for at most 30 more minutes, and then probably less, and we can chat about other stuff or continue diving into the depths of clinical research if you guys are still interested in that. So, okay, so what do we have here? We have an iPad. This is the main deployment device. This is the main goal is for mobility of the solution. There have been studies. I've done a lot of academic reading on clinical research and the use of tablets versus PCs and that sort of thing. There's a lot of evidence that tablets are really useful for two reasons in clinical research. One is because really the touch interface is has low barriers to entry, right? It has low training requirements. Typically, if you have an interface that's well designed, which I want to thank Albert for. I also attended Albert's master class. Where were we, Albert? We were in Belgrade. And
Yes, it was.
yeah, and I it's a terrific couple of days that we spent together, and I learned a lot on that. And this was my project during that master class. And so when you have a well-designed solution, you have a really low requirement for training. And in a case like this, where we're deploying this all over the world, I don't really need to be traveling to these locations to train people. And really, there's no reason people should be paying my plane ticket to go there if things are functioning well and designed right. So that's really the one of the main goals here is ease of training and low deployment requirements. So iPad, kind of a natural solution to that. In addition, clinical interviews, there's been quite a body of research done on the difference between capturing data on PCs or laptops versus tablets. And the idea being that, now in the 21st century, basically all of our health records being captured in a digital device, whether it's, and usually, ideally, you want it to happen during the patient encounter because, some doctors are still taking written notes, but then they have to pay somebody to transcribe that note into a digital system because all health records are digital now. It's been a mandate in the US for quite a while. And well, it's actually not mandated, but there's a strong financial incentive for your medical practitioners to be using digital systems. They get their Medicare reimbursements at a higher rate if they're using a digital system. So anyway, the studies have shown that the idea of holding a tablet in front of you while you're dealing with a patient or a study participant for that matter is a much less intimidating form factor than if you're sitting in front of a computer. It interrupts the interaction less. And so for that reason, tablets are really a great solution for data capture as well, because you're dealing in a clinical environment. These people aren't necessarily showing up with symptoms, but you're talking to them about very personal stuff. And so the less of a barrier that you have between the two of you is really essential for that kind of intimate interview. If you have a big computer at a desktop, sitting at a desk, it's very formal. Even a laptop in the field, it's cumbersome, right? Tablet is really, it sort of becomes invisible in that situation, or as invisible as possible, right? Okay, so that's why one of the goals is to work on a tablet. We chose iOS because FileMaker works on iOS. So what we have here is a list of participants, and there's just a few things to show about this screen here. We have a sync button. We'll talk a little bit more about sync later. We have a search bar. We have a plus button, that's for creating new participants. We've got a search bar, and then we have a list of participants down below. So I can scroll down, and they're categorized right now by eligible and ineligible participants. And I'll show you what that means in a minute. And we also have this participant agenda toggle. So should I show you the agenda now? Sure, why not? So the agenda is, so the participant list, searchable list of the entire database, right? The agenda is, okay, what do I have to do today, right? What visits, what participants are coming up for what visit? So and by the way, this is all sample data, right? I'm not showing you actual participant data here. This is all dummy data. So Bernice Farrell, right? She's due for a screening visit to come in at 1:51 p.m. today. And I guess she did because it says all forms are completed. So apparently she came in. However, the consent visit for her still needs to be done. So maybe she hasn't left yet, and maybe some other staff member is dealing with the consent visit for her. Or she's here now, right? So that's what the idea of the agenda view is. This is sort of like a to-do list for the day. And we can toggle between day and week. So here we have the entire week view. At this point, I can export this list if I'm on a laptop, which this is deployed on laptops and iPads. I can export this list, and then I can make phone calls to remind people to come in. There are some other techniques for compliance in terms of people, participants coming back for their appointments, SMS texts, that sort of thing. But actually, phone calls have been shown to be the most effective way of getting people to come back in. So I've been looking a lot at adding some features like SMS reminders and that sort of thing, and I probably will. But phone calls are the best way to get people to return for their appointment. And the way they do it now is they'll export a list. It'll show up as an Excel spreadsheet, and they can just work their way down the list. We have, of course, contact information for all of these participants. When you export it, it'll have their name and their contact, as well as the appointment date that they're supposed to be coming in. So you make a phone call, remind them to come in. Okay, enough about that. So let's, I want to create a new participant just to show you. Actually, this is going to highlight some of the issues, some of the challenges that we've had. So let's just enter Bart Simpson. So this is an interesting thing. So a lot of times, especially if you're doing a study of children, you actually are going to be capturing a dyad, a child-parent dyad. And meaning that you're always going to be having the parent information as well as the child information. You may or may not be doing a study on both. It may just be the child that you're doing the study on, but you need to capture the information of the parent in order to complete informed consent, which is another critical part of the clinical research. You need consent in order to do any of this research. For minors, it's considered assent, and for adults, considered consent. But the basic idea is that you need to tell them a great deal about the research, why you're doing the research, what the effect on them is going to be, that they can withdraw any time that is completely voluntary, and that sort of thing. There's a list of, I think, 11 criteria of what you need to communicate to people in order for them to give informed consent. And this goes back to, well, it goes back a long time, but it goes back to the idea of clinicians abusing the participants, tricking them into participating, making them feel like they have to participate, conducting experiments on them that they didn't agree to. And the surprising thing about that is that this was really going on up until about the 1970s, which is really shocking, really. It wasn't until, well, the most shocking were Nazis during World War II conducting extremely gruesome experiments on prisoners of war, but mainly Jewish concentration camp inmates, without their consent and, for their own horrible reasons. But at the Nuremberg trials, it was realized that, well, there's no real international guideline about this. So we need to establish, at the Nuremberg trials where they tried the Nazis, they realized, well, we need to establish some kind of a standard for what like the human right aspect of this, what people need to be agreeing to and informed about research. So it all really started because of World War II, even though this kind of abuse was going on long before that, and continued because after Nuremberg, it was a part of there was a treaty signed, but these regulations were not adopted inside countries until, like I said, the 70s, really. So anyway, again, moving on. I found that there are a lot of really interesting facets to this the idea of research in general. Okay, so we created Bart-Simpson, and what I want to show here is, we talked about before the eligibility criteria. So the idea right now is we have a new participant, but we don't know whether they qualify for the study. So we have a list here. Well, we show at the top that it's incomplete, a little question mark in the head, right? And then we have a list of 4 criteria that are required for this study. And right now, none of these criteria have any marks. So let's just go and make this person eligible. Hopefully I get the date of birth within the range, because then I'd have to do it all over again if I mess up. So here, this is the point where it's appropriate to talk about electronic signatures. There's a regulation about electronic signatures also. It's under the Code of Federal Regulations 21 Part 11, I think. Somebody can correct me if that's wrong, but I think 21 Part 11. Code of Federal Regulations is the sort of living document that contains all of the rules that the federal government imposes on us. Or anyone operating inside the United States. Or for that matter, Americans operating outside the United States. Also covers that. And so electronic signatures is one of the things that it covers. What qualifies as a valid electronic signature? You need to know you need to be able to verify the identity. You need to be able to tag the document with that person's identity marker. And you need to be able to know if anything has changed since they signed it. So the signature that I'm about to apply here to this screening form is, now I'm using a test account, but ordinarily this would be an actual individual's username and password. I just need to focus here so I don't screw up the password. See if I got that right. Okay. So do you see, okay, so location received, improving accuracy. So this also tags it with a geolocation marker. That's another great thing about the iPad, right, is that it has GPS built in. So we can tag these things with their location data, which can be really valuable to have as a researcher, right, to know where this form was completed. And okay, so e-signatures. So we know who this research assistant was because we created the user account for them, and they've authenticated, they've signed into the database. And in addition, they've also re-authenticated before signing the form. So that was basically just a regular FileMaker login screen, but it's just the idea of validating the person's identity when we're applying that signature. Now, the difference is, I want to go back here. So maybe I didn't explain what we're looking at now. We're back on the same screen. This is the screening visit for Bart-Simpson, which is what was created just after we created the participant himself. And we needed to fill out the, well, actually there are two visits that are created. The screening visit, which has just one form. The reason why these are separated into different visits is because they're being dealt with by different people, different staff members who are doing data capture. But let's talk about the eligibility here. I just want to point out that there are 3 eligibility criteria that are now satisfied that have check marks next to them. So age, planning to remain in the area, and the mother is a member of the health, the local health, or it's a, this is actually a study cohort, the GPC. And so now the idea of consent, which is related to e-signatures that I was talking about a minute ago. So the RAs, when they sign the form, they've logged in, we know who they are, we capture their signature, and that's a valid e-signature. We have an audit log behind here, which we'll talk about in a minute, and that is a totally valid e-signature. Now, the other factor here for eligibility is consent. Now, that's informed consent that I talked about. The key of this is, well, we really need a signature. We need the participant's signature that they've received the informed consent information and that they have consented. However, we can't actually get an e-signature from them because we don't have identity verification. And because we're dealing with rural people in a rural environment who are not signed into the system, I mean, we've all used electronic signatures, right, by DocuSign or HelloSign or any number. You know, there are lots of these systems now that you can use for signing mortgages and signing legal documents and contracts and all this stuff. But that's all because we've authenticated our identity with these services. And DocuSign has different levels based on the type of legality that they're trying to satisfy. You know, when it comes to signing a lease, it might be enough to know that there was your email address that the form was sent to. So you logged into your email address, so we know that. But in this case, we're dealing with people that probably or may not have email at all. But in any case, they're sitting right in front of us. We can't really have that turnaround of, you know, send them an email, wait for that. So in this case, informed consent is either done by snapping a photo of their identity card. What's that? Oh. Or something like that, but the e-signature is not valid here. So I'm signing as an RA, but the participant themselves cannot apply an e-signature in this case. So let me just sign this form. Don't know why I made this password so complicated. Whoops. Okay, got it that time. So it's getting the GPS location, tagging that with location, and tagging it with my e-signature. So anyway, I think I explained that well enough. At this point, the next step would be to, so I don't know if you can see the little spinner, but this is actually working right now. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute, because we'll see a much longer delay in a second. But essentially what's happening right now is that the database is going through the study schema. It's doing two things, actually. It's going through the study schema to create this baseline visit, which it just created. That wasn't there before. I'm going to check in for this so that it sorts properly in the list. And it was also going through the eligibility criteria and validating that. And now you can see that this participant is eligible for the study. But the real reason it was slow is because of the audit log. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you an even longer version of it right now. So now at this point, we're looking at the Bart Simpson. We know he's eligible. He has, we've completed the screening visit. We've completed the consent and the consent visit. And now there's a baseline visit. I can show you the different CRFs or forms for the baseline visit. And this can fill up depending on the study schema quite a bit. So now we've defined 3 visits here. Actually, this study schema has many more visits. So click on the plus button. The first 3 are ad hoc visits. If they come in and they're sick, we want to get a little more information from them. If they drop out, they don't want to come back, we want to fill out a termination form. If they have an adverse event or just something comes up, we might want to log another issue. Otherwise, we are ready to schedule with them when they'd like to come back. So we know that the next appointment is going to be 8 weeks from now, so we can give them a choice of, do they want a regular day per week to come in? 9:45 p.m. is not probably the best, so let's say 11:45. Okay, now I'm going to create the schedule, and now we're going to sit here and wait. But I have things to talk about while we do this. So here's the issue. This is where I want to talk about the audit log. So what's happening right now, it's going through the framework where we've defined the study schema, and it's looking through, I think in this study, it's a 2-year study. It's every 2 months. So it's probably about 26 visits or something like that it's scheduling right now. So 26 visits, but then each visit has maybe 10, maybe a half a dozen to a dozen different forms. So if that's 10, we're talking about 200 records maybe that it's creating right now. That should be pretty quick, right? However, what's slowing it down, I mean, first of all, this is an iPad mini. It's not the fastest iPad. This goes much faster on my iPad Pro. But it is slower than the desktop for sure on the iPad. So creating 200 records on the iPad does take a little time. And it's the audit log, though, that is really killing this right now. So currently, there are two technologies that we're using here, which were third-party modules. The first is the audit log, and the second is syncing. The audit log, there are a couple of different techniques for doing an audit log. Okay, there we go. It finally finished everything. But it took a while. It took a couple minutes, I think, maybe 2 minutes to do that. Kind of unacceptable, really. The audit log, I don't know if you guys, I know a lot of you guys know Ray Colligan. So Ray developed Ultralog, which is a great audit logging tool. The downside of audit log is that it logs everything in the record that it's logging. And the only downside with that really is that it bloats that particular record. So there's another audit log module, which I've used audit log and it's great. But that's the downside, is it bloats that record. Every change is adding and adding to that record. It's also adding to a single audit log field in that record. So every time that audit log, anytime anything changes on that record, something gets added to that audit log field, that entire audit log field is now changed. That affects syncing. So every time that anything changes, it has to sync that record, but that entire audit log field has to be synced as well. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger every single time you make a change. So that is a killer when it comes to syncing from Uganda, where you're dealing with maybe an edge network. So for data efficiency, a better module in this case is One More Thing's Audit Log Pro. The difference is that Audit Log Pro has one record for every change you make. Every field change you make gets logged as one record in the audit log. So there's a separate audit log table. Every record is logging one change in the database. So that's great for syncing, because two great things about syncing that. One is it's very atomized, right? Everything is very tiny and discrete. So every change is small, and so it only gets synced once, right? If I change a field twice, well, that second change is the only thing that has to get sent up the second time, not the first change and the second change. The other thing is we can do a one-way sync. So we send that data up once, we never have to pull it down again. All the log is the record, right? It's a record that something happened. And all we want is that information to be in a central place, right? So it never has to come down again. So if we were syncing the records, the CRF itself has to be a two-way sync, because it may be completed here, but actually my colleague, the RA down the hall, he needs to see that record himself. So he needs to have a two-way sync to pull that CRF, that case report form down. But we don't want him to pull the audit log down, right? So the one more thing, Audit Log Pro, it's great because it syncs in tiny increments, and we can have it sync only one way because it's in a separate table. Downside is, it has to create a new record every single time a change is made. It kills the database. It's amazing how long it takes to create records. So, first of all, when you initialize a record, it's going to write the audit log. It's going to write an empty value for every field in that table, every field in that record. So it might be writing 60 audit log records that are blank in that initialization. Now I've actually tuned this so that it skips that initial blank part, but every time every time you make a change, that's what it's doing. It's doing every single field. So it's a balancing act, right? Okay, so just to summarize where we're at, we've created a new participant. We have screened them. We established that they're eligible for the study. We've got their informed consent, and now we've scheduled out the entire protocol for them in the study. And if I chose at this point, I could tap the sync button, the little cloud, our happy little cloud sync button, and send that data back to the central data repository where our PIs, our principal investigators, can review and check that out. Okay, so now that's the end of the demo. I want to switch back and talk specifically again about some of these challenges. We've covered a lot of them, so I don't need to go into them in too much more depth, but there are some things I haven't mentioned yet. So let me switch back. Does everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, challenges. There have been a lot of challenges in this project. Data security, privacy regulation. I think I talked enough about this. I really want to breeze through this so that we can, so I don't go over on time, and in case anybody has any questions about it. But the main data security and privacy issues are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality is controlled access, meaning password protection and encryption. So, most of you guys know this stuff in terms of what this means. We do encryption at rest and encryption in transit. So the only transiting is the syncing. We use MirrorSync by 360works. It's been great. I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to do syncing. It's really a great solution. Jesse and the whole team over there, they're really great with product support. And I've tested the other syncing options that are out there, with the exception of building my own. I've tested the other commercial options out there, and I endorse 360works. In fact, they did a case study. If you go onto their website, you'll find a case study of Connect that they have published. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Integrity is about audit logging. So I told you about that and the challenges about that. Actually, I have a plan for improving the audit logging. I'm going to do a combination of RAIS and one more thing's auditing solutions with a little FileMaker modernity thrown in the form of JSON data structures. I think that we can do the initial auditing with RAIS method of storing it in the same record and in a JSON format, and then do a little twist of a scheduled dump into a separate table, maybe before the syncing happens or something like that. I haven't quite worked out exactly how, but I think you can't get around the great benefit of having the law being structured in the way that One More Thing has done. You just have to get around the idea of how long it takes on iPad to do it. So I think there's just a question of timing. You log it in the record first, and then you move it out in I don't know, some scheduled fashion, or when it's not going to be interrupting the users. Data availability is about backups. So right now we're hosting this with FMP host. I might move it in-house for hosting. You know, the backups right now go to S3. They're also downloadable, but anyway, that's what availability is. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, those are the things that HIPAA requires in the Code of Federal Regulation. HIPAA, by the way, is just the act, right? It's the law that Congress wrote. And then it was up to the agencies, FDA and, well, the other federal agencies to codify those into the CFR. So the CFR is actually the document that you follow. HIPAA is the act that Congress wrote, but nobody wants to read the act. Nobody needs to, just read the CFR. And by the way, FDA has industry guidelines. These are like little essays where they tell you that, yeah, you know, it's written, the CFR is written this way, but we expect you to, this is how we expect you to interpret it. So those are very useful documents, guidelines for industry. E-signatures, we talked about that. Signing forms versus informed consent, e-signatures by participants. But I'll tell you, the biggest challenge of doing this in FileMaker has been the idea that every form I've had to develop myself in the FileMaker IDE in terms of defining the tables for the forms and the variables for the forms. This is something that is pretty labor intensive, mainly because there's a design process that goes through to design these things. And it's involved really in committee because the study research staff, there's a lot of debate and discussion about what data to capture, how these forms are structured, who is going to collect this data in terms of which clinical staff member, in which room, in which part of the workflow when they're interviewing the people. So it's really, it's a huge time burden for me if this design process has to happen where I'm creating fields in records, putting it on a layout, showing it to them, they say, well, you know, we need to tweak it this way and that way. So what I've done is I have you know, junior developers doing that design and that back and forth. But really, the solution is to get that design out of the hands of a developer altogether. And so this is where Connect version 2 is headed, where the schema will be designed in the data structure. You know, we'll have tables for forms and tables for variables. And that way, the study designers themselves can design the study inside the tool, right? Without having to use the FileMaker IDE. Syncing, talked about that. Deployment and updates, that's been another challenge, really, getting the file down. I've looked a lot into iOS deployment, into App Store, you know, building this as an App Store solution. There are pros and cons to that. It hasn't been worthwhile to go down that road yet. But it's something that, in terms of scaling, you know, the idea behind Connect is to really scale this so that a lot of people can use it and bring the cost down for people to use and bring the labor down for, well, the labor on the developer side down, right, to lower the cost. And so along with that is maybe the idea of restructuring the data model, but also streamlining the deployment scenario. Right now we use a lot of different methods. You can download directly from the server onto your iPad, but deployment, you know, it's complicated because you might need to be replacing files. Now there are lots of solutions for doing this in place, where you can have a little utility file which is in a container and you export that out and it does the download and it replaces the file. There are pros and cons to that, let's say. And another area that needs improvement is data export. Currently, that's a challenge, mainly because the stats packages have their own proprietary data format. Excel tends to be a good middle format, right? It's pretty much read by everything, and FileMaker can write to it. But there are issues there are just always issues with translating data. So we're looking at ways of improving that. And finally, a big limitation is that it's limited to the platforms, right? I would love to deploy this on Android, and of course we have what is it, LCFM, right? Live Code FM. So interestingly, I don't know if you guys all know about that, but it's basically a way for deploying FileMaker files on Android. Interestingly, their system requirements right now are pretty high, and to buy a tablet, I shopped around to look for tablets that I could buy that satisfied their system requirements. They're pretty high-end tablets. They're not cheaper than an iPad. So I don't know. That's something I would love to hear anybody's experience with if you've done that. I'm wrapping up this is the last slide, and we can talk some more about this, but I love any of your feedback on any of these challenges that I've encountered to see your own experiences on that. So I think that's it, actually. Yeah, I think that's it. So let me cancel the screen share, and we can go back to gallery view and open this up. I think, wow, I think timing is perfect. So thanks. That's the end of the talk. Does anybody have any feedback? I'd love to hear if anybody has dealt with live code FM at all, any personal experiences with that. Wow, wake up, everybody.
Yeah, hi, Caleb. A quick question, if I may. Have you looked into using GoZync? I think it's called GoZync, as far as the stuff.
Yeah, I use GoZync, and so GoZync is a nice, elegant solution. However, it relies on having an open network connection to FileMaker server, which is a very bandwidth intensive protocol, and it just dies when you're dealing with the remote areas on high latency mobile connections. So so MirrorSync is using the data API now. It was using the XML API, and it's always been much more reliable in a couple of senses. One, because it chunks out the data, but also just because it's using HTTP as a protocol, which is much more tolerant of these unreliable network connections. So yeah, I use GoZync. Nothing bad to say about it, other than it's just it can't, the FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Go to server network connection that it relies on is just not capable of handling unreliable mobile connections.
And one other thing is, you mentioned about the concept of using the App Store for distribution and updates. That would be something that could work, I would imagine, particularly well with the GoZync, i.e. get your thing approved once. It's a pain, FileMaker doesn't recommend it, but it's possible. But once you get it approved, then essentially, at least as far as the updates is concerned, that would take care of it, at least for the Mac community, and especially as we're moving on to the A1 chip.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. There were a couple of great DevCon presentations of people who have deployed to the iOS App Store, and I would say the challenges are, first of all, getting it approved, of course, building it and getting it approved, but then the app update process. So two things. One is, if we have an app which is syncing per client, right? Because this is not an app where we can blend client data, because it's protected health information. So it has to be discrete per client. So it's just the idea of somebody downloading an app which is then something they need to have their own unique identifier in order to sync to their own version of the database on a server somewhere. I think it's doable, but it's complex. It's a complex problem.
Very good. Thank you.
Caleb, Tim Owen here. I have a question. It was a fascinating discussion of some of the complexities involved, particularly in medical related software. I noticed that on, I think it was the consent form was bilingual, looked like it was Swahili or something, but wonder if you could discuss some of the aspects of creating an interface that's bilingual, has two different languages. Presumably Ecuador would have had to use Spanish largely, if not the Spanish version of FileMaker, but I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that aspect of the development.
Yeah, so that's another great topic that I should have put on there. So localization of language, right? Localization has a couple of different issues anyway. You know, like at the very basic level, just date formats, right? Everybody except the US has a different date format than the US does. So that's been one just sort of aspect of localization. But language is something that I haven't tackled quite yet, the localization of language. We've just done this in terms of showing, showing bilingual labels like you saw. But let's see, what did you see? Yeah, you saw, actually, I'm not sure what language that is. Oh, it signed me out. I want to sign in again. So that was, that was a study in Uganda. Oh, so that means it was Lugandan, yeah, that we were seeing, that bilingual language. But anyway, yeah, so localization, that's on the roadmap. And there was a great talk at, so there's been a conference I've been going to called .fmp in Berlin. There's a great talk by a guy who did a very nice localization system where he was using global variables in an array for his localization labels and variables. However, redoing my data model so that the forms themselves are user defined actually frees it up so that they can also enter their own custom localized labels, but the navigation elements and stuff like that that are hard coded, that would be something that needs to be localized.
It's a really interesting question that you come across. And then, hold on, guys, I was here twice. Someone fixed my problem. There we go. When you come across something like you did, Caleb, in Berlin, where you'd like to use a system, but you find that it's just not amenable to backfilling it. You know, you've gone too far down a road. I don't know if you've come across anything like this in your project where, how did your app continue to grow and change in a good direction after you had tons and tons of work in it? Right. I mean, I think that's basically the issue that you're coming up with. You know very well all the different syncing systems. You're looking abroad for various ways to deal with localization, but then you have your system, right? And it seems like what we often end up with in FileMaker is systems that tend to grow and change ever more less easily, maybe kind of like our old bodies getting a little creaky, right? So have you come across anything that's actually helped you continue with a project with a long time frame?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I run into that in other aspects as well. I mean, every FileMaker project that lasts more than a year, right? Or maybe even shorter than that. So the big one here is the idea of allowing user-defined protocols. And what I've realized is that I have like maybe two layers of the system. there's a control layer, and then there's a data layer. And the control layer is what is handling the scheduling of CRFs and the eligibility determination, the navigation, and that sort of thing. And then there's the data layer, which is, okay, I need a table for every CRF, and I need variable fields within that table. And that's the one that I'm really struggling with, the data layer. And this is something that I believe that the JavaScript features in FileMaker 19 will help out with. But I'm also a little bit, well, I'm not sure if it's a panacea, a silver bullet to the whole thing, but I do think that I've created this two-layer structure where my control layer actually can survive this restructuring of the data layer. So when I talk about Connect version 2 being a user-defined, having the protocol be user-defined, it's really only to change the data layer. I think it will in some ways affect the control layer, but largely I think the control layer will survive. And so yeah, so that's my strategy right now, is that I have this isolation between the two. And I think that I will be able, now, right, I'm in the middle of 2 implementations right now. So that's the trouble too, is I need a little bit of breathing room where I can work on the structure of the application itself. But that's the next goal, is to work on this data layer.
Oh.
Yeah. On the other hand, I have other projects where I'm terrified of that are in use in clinical environments, where patients, like, literally lives are on the line. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but these are information systems of people that have been in car accidents, and it's transmitting data between clinicians and their diagnostic radiologists. And so this is a nerve-wracking situation where if there's a problem with the code that I deploy, then yeah, it's scary. That said, I wanted to mention another product. So GoZync, that's by, well, it was a collaboration between Seed Code and Geist. I think Geist is marketing it now, or it might be Seed Code marketing it. But anyway, it was a collaboration between those two. Auto by Geist has been a great tool for DevOps and deploying things rapidly that I've really appreciated a lot, because I can back out changes quickly. Now, it doesn't help me with Connect at all. This is deployment is totally manual because it's to clients. I've got a real client server based environment, but when it comes to an environment where it's deployed on the server and people are connecting to the server directly, then Auto is a great deployment solution. But Albert, can you tell me, what do you think about that problem that you raise about sort of backing yourself into a corner that you need to, or painting yourself into a corner that you need to find a way out of?
Well, I think you've implemented one of the approaches that we do, which is, I mean, you could say you're separating your schema layer from your business logic, right? Trying to create a stack. And of course, it's FileMaker. It's not going to be anything you purely call a properly stacked app, but you can build it in a way that allows you to do what you have done, right? I mean, I don't know, just thinking of the auditing tools that you mentioned. The second one that you mentioned, what was the name of that one? The second one?
So Fabrice Normand of One More Thing
so Fabrice's solution, that super atomic level of logging, a very, very atomic approach can give you a lot more flexibility down the line. It generates obviously a lot of data, a lot of individual records, but it gives you that level of flexibility. So like a fully factored schema can often do that, or a place where you're actually trying to push as much of schema typing into data, right? So you end up having more tables that have a field called type, And by doing that, you can often reduce, you can increase the flexibility of the changes in your system down the road, rather than kind of building in. I guess it's a business, at a certain level, we all are familiar with strong typing, right? Or permissive data typing, right? And so FileMaker is a permissively typed system. But I'm sorry, FileMaker's database is very permissive in terms of its ability to put whatever data types you want into it. But systems as a whole can be strongly typed, or they can be flexibly typed. And I think the direction that you'd go in to have a system that grows more flexibly over time is one where you have that permissive typing at the level of the system. Now, having said that, I know there's a lot to show behind that, but at least that's a partial answer to your question.
Yeah,
Well,
Albert,
so
you're
to that-
cutting into your own time now, so.
I'm cutting my own neck because I can tell you when we
Okay.
posted this yesterday, we were way over time, so I better shut up.
Hey, Caleb, thanks so much. That was a great presentation. It's
Thank you, Caleb.
amazing to see where it's come over the years.
Thank you indeed.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to turn it over to Albert and Small Company. Albert, I assume you can introduce your team and everything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Albert needs no introduction, so I'm just going to let him go. So it's all yours, Albert.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. What an honor to be with you. I'm going to turn this off because in a second I'm going to be sharing Fob and Mia's computer screen in Belgrade. So I want to keep my bandwidth down. So you will thankfully not have to look at my face anymore. Well, maybe a second from now when I pull up my screen and I will show you. Yeah, my face is one of the ones there. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Well, look, first of all, it's so
Yep.
great to be back with FMDiSC because this is like the premier user group. I've been to a lot of them around the world. Developer groups like FMDiSC are few and far between. And it's you guys are great for the super high level of your development and your discussion and your friendships. So it's just really great to be with you again. And I really am thankful that you're here to see where some of the ideas of the Design Masterclass have gone. Tim, you said such kind words to me and I was responding, but I was muted, wasn't I? And so I said, thank you very much, but you heard nothing, which was probably very rude. So my apologies for that. But what I'd like to do is to introduce who is here today and who's been involved with this team. And if you can, design team guys, as I introduce you, can you say hello just so I know that you've made it? So heading down the list. Well, first of all, I don't suppose Jonna and Hazel made it, did they? Jonna, Hazel? These are the ladies who are now running the company, and it's a much better company for it. So thankful for them. Let's scoot on down. And I know that Susan is here and it was even making very good use of her time, multitasking, spooning, dare I say, with the event. Susan, are you on mic?
I am.
It's such an honor to have Susan be able to be working with us, even if it's in a limited fashion. Really wonderful to have Susan with us. I think Karina is here as well. She's coming on as part of our design team. I think Tomas has made it into the session. Tomas, are you here?
Here.
There's Tomas. He's quiet because he's all the way in Mexico City so far. So, okay, Fob and Mia are both here. Yes, Fob, do you hear me?
Yes, we are both here.
Nice to be here. Hi.
This is a dynamic duo, a married couple who are working for SmallCo. And I should say that as the dynamics go on, let me just point out that we have Mia's father, Milan, working with us. And then we have Mia and Fob as well. And then there is Rosaling, who I have been so thankful to be part of the team, and Roz has added so much. On her second stint at SmallCo, you all may remember Roz from maybe 6, 7, 8 years back, working with SmallCo, and she's back with us. Roz, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hola.
And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Roz for a quick introduction before I start the first slide.
All right. So hello, everyone, and it's great to be back in SmallCo. And while ALBER is getting ready there, I'm going to talk a little bit about back in the day. So before I knew ALBER, the Design Masterclass, and the Design Masterclass, I was always curious about the thought process that took place in order to decide how something would look and work. Like, for example, how does a design evolve from a simple phone to becoming the smartphone that we have nowadays, which is like a window to the world for us? And why is the VW Bug so iconic? It's so attractive. So then I got the opportunity to work with ALBER, and I found that I wasn't alone in this desire to understand, and that my curiosity was also my calling. With the content of the Design Masterclass, I learned how to communicate ideas and concepts that I always knew were out there and around us, but I didn't really know how to put them into words. And this has happened to me a lot. And these rules and patterns that ALBER has identified provide a rich vocabulary to share this knowledge and continue to grow and explore it as we go. So for some people, my conversations with ALBER might seem odd, but for me, it's so interesting and so fun to finally, be able to find the right words to talk about things. It encourages us to use embodied language that brings our designs to life. From my first experience in a design masterclass, a good, like ALBER said, like 8 or 9 years ago, to now, I have noticed a deeper, more universal analysis has taken place in the development of these rules. And what amazes me the most is the connection between all of them. With that said, I invite you all to think outside the app to see how it fits in the bigger picture. Now let's take a look at history. And ALBER will now share with us some interesting facts about tech evolution and domestication with some very familiar and unexpected examples.
Thanks, Roz. Roz said the last time she delivered that little introduction, it was a little bit different. She said, when I started to speak with ALBER about these design things, I felt like I'd finally arrived at my home planet. And I said, Rosaling, you just called me an alien. And she said, yeah, pretty much. And look, guys, it's the way it's a refrain of my presentations in the past to understand, hey, listen, we are not normal. We are quants. We are people who love the world of numbers. We're designers who are definitely a breed apart. But we do work for the most part with normal people. And we tend to call them bad names like user. One of the most difficult challenges we faced in writing this was finding a new word for user. And Susan led the way on the search. And along the way, having discarded terms like client and even beloved, we've decided that when we're designing for someone who will use one of our tools, that person is my boo. And so you may hear terms like that coming up. And in the effort to try to find words that really fit what we're doing, we've had some rather strict rules to say, let's make sure that these are approachable terms, therefore things like my boo. So hopefully it replaces a design vocabulary that speaks way too much about things like skeuomorphism or uncanny valleys or things that just really do make people think like we come from another planet. So let me jump in if I can. And I think I already skipped there. I went too fast. I'm going to start with an apology because it turns out in our discoveries of late that much of what I taught in my design masterclass had these big aching gaps in it. I'll give you one example. I would teach a term called forgiveness. And I loved it. I taught it with real passion because it sounded so inspiring and kind of poetic. And it was so enchanting to me that I never asked the following question: who is forgiving who? And the more I thought about it, I said, well, really what I've been telling to the folks in my class is that we should make sure that our computer forgives us for being. Forgiveness is a wonderful thing, a wonderful concept. But just to point out, the way it's used in these rules, as soon as you say forgiveness, you have to ask, well, who? Who's the actor? Who is the agent? Who is doing the forgiving? And who exactly is receiving this kind, gracious indulgence, you know? Well, I mean, in the case of the Mac, it was whoever ponied up the big check for the original Mac computer. It was a lot of money. And the whole idea that the computer that you paid all that money for is kind enough to forgive you shows that something is kind of off kilter. And so what we've tried to do in these rules is to supply the missing agents, the missing objects. The analysis has gotten into things like hypoagency, which we'll discuss briefly, and just generally puts the people back in the picture. I'll speak a little bit more about the two targets that we'll be speaking to about today. Those would be folks who are coders and quants and people who live in the ethereal, abstract worlds of mathematics and logic, and then designers who are a breed apart as well. Let me continue. At this point, I'm going to switch to the presentation that was promised to go first. And so Roz referred to this just a moment ago. Thanks to those folks who were chatting with me in Cleveland on the bridge crossing the flats back in 2016. I think some folks on this call walked across that bridge with the big bunch of us. And at that time, I was working out these notions of domestication and how apps are being domesticated to us, and we in turn to them, a process known as co-domestication. So that's what I'll be speaking of a bit. Let me jump in. First of all, as a designer, I'd like to say that I've discovered that designers are neither necessary nor sufficient for the production of good tech. We have our place, we have our time, but we shouldn't rule the whole process, and we don't. At the very beginning of technological development, usually that tech breakthrough, whatever it is, it's allowed us to go faster, bigger, stronger, or smaller, or more inexpensive. That thing provides such a great advantage to it that we don't really mind if it's not the greatest, we would say, user experience, right? So you're taking the train, the great transcontinental railroad. You can go across the country and it takes a matter of days rather than months. That's fantastic. It's so good that you don't mind that you're basically bathing yourself in fly ash and smoke the entire way. So it comes a little bit later, this notion that someone is going to design the rail cars to be a better experience for the user. That is a stage. And the stage doesn't last forever either in terms of the dominance of designers. There's only so far you can go when what you're providing is ease of use, because eventually any technical tool starts to handle things that are not easy. And I know you've all used a tool where it's actually a pretty sophisticated tool, let's say something like what Caleb just showed us, and some designer came along and said, well, people are stupid, and so it should be easy, idiot proof for stupid people who can't understand things. No matter that the folks you're designing it for are academic researchers, right? Brilliant people, right? So design has clear limits. And if you look, I'm going to return to this slide after I talk about these, the evolution of these computers and these newspaper designs. But I just want to show you briefly that there was a time when design was predominant in the world of design of computers, in which designers clearly had the lead. It didn't last long. And it lasted, well, a longer time, proportionally, a shorter time in proportion to this timeline here, which goes back to 1618 for newspapers, where designers were predominant people like Ben Franklin, right? That was a relatively brief time before it moved on to a matter of true teamwork and eventually to craft. So what I'm asserting here is that software, computers, phones, it's not yet a craft, but that's where it's headed to. And hopefully with the rules that we'll show today, we can get it there. So a number of things that we have domesticated and which in turn are domesticating us, right? You couldn't blame an alien from Roz and my planet. It's their first time to Earth. And they fly around and they say, look at all that plant, that corn, that maize growing everywhere. How is it making the people take care of it? More of the Earth's surface is covered with maize than any other crop. And it's because it's good, it tastes good, sweet, right? It's very addictive to us. And it kind of took over our culture coming out of Mexico, evolving from something that was very, very different, much less tasty, called teosinte, to the point where now it's the most popular cash crop in the world by far. The same process of domestication is happening with items that are here, from newspapers, computers, and on down. Tech is doing the same kind of thing, and I want to show you what that pattern is. So first of all, things start out kind of overwhelming. And as time goes on, they end up taking on a schema that's much like us. They start to proportion themselves to our bodies, or depending on your point of view on co-domestication, we begin to proportion them to ourselves. And over time, tools scale down till they have the proportions of children. Now, I don't mean that they're always small and the size of children. A Fiat 500, a VW Bug, even a certain gas pump from the 1950s can have a sense of being childlike, even though it's much larger than a child. So the terms here, which I'm sure many of you know, are neoteny and domestication. If you don't, I'm sure you'll look them up very soon. So here is our example of neoteny. Simply put, a form that is neotenous is one that keeps the proportions of the child, the young animal. So here the wolf pup. And of course, what happens today is as dogs grow up, they preserve more of the proportions of a puppy than does a wolf. We're about to see that act out here with tech. So it's 1946, you're in Philadelphia, and you're on the campus of UPenn, and you go in this room, and there it is. And it's pretty imposing, but really valuable, right? Because if you had any of these brilliant mathematicians, the women in these pictures, do the calculations on their own, they are brilliant, but would take them 20 hours to do the calculations. This machine can do it in 30 seconds. That was an incredible advantage. And so once again, early tech, the advantage provided here is so large that we don't care that it may not be the easiest thing to use. So if you look at this, you see there's really no clear marking of the front or the top. There's no clear face to this. You can actually manipulate it from either side, from all sides. And the scale jumps straight from really, really small stuff basically to the whole room. There's no sense of stepwise organization. In fact, it looks an awful lot here on the right, like may they rest in peace, the Twin Towers from Manhattan. So what happens? Wow, I timed that perfectly. That cat is actually trained to move me on when it's time for me to go to the next slide. That was, wow, I'm doing great. 1970, the PDP-11 is now about the size of an adult. Take a look at it right. Furthermore, it has these modules to it, right? You can see the modular shape, which is more like we're put together. You know, head, arms, shoulders, trunk, legs. And you know exactly where to talk to it. Like this is the front. This is the business end, we would say, right? This is where you're communicating with. And so what's happened is, for sure, the PDP-11, any of its models, would calculate a lot faster than the ENIAC. But by this time, you have various subsystems that are vying for prominence. So all these units are held together by a groundbreaking bus system that lets you kind of build the computer that you need, right? And so it's no longer a focus on doing one thing really, really fast. There starts to be a balance of goals in this design, right? And so there's obviously plenty of design here, but this was long before we started to talk about, you know, interaction designers. Then there was the Macintosh. And the amazing thing about it is to note that none of the subsystems, from the screen to the floppy disk to anything in here, is groundbreaking. You could have found something to beat it in every regard. But what was created here is a balance among those systems so that you could get something that produced a self, a minion, very clearly evoking a minion, some helpful little critter who's going to take care of you. And of course, a minion's proportions are Kinder schema. Well, if you have a human baby, okay, it can have a nice, beautiful, large head and eyes looking up at you and these tiny little arms, but it does need to have arms and legs, however tiny they might be at the start, because eventually the thing's going to grow up. The baby is at a point where, through this phenomenon of hypoagency, it can do so little for itself, but it does it in such a pathetic and inspiring way that we will do everything for it. We will poke it and prod it and feed it and take care of it and, you know, just love it to death and just spend hours staring at the little thing, right? So it's doing a number on us. That's called hypoagency. Now, what's happened, of course, is that phones, they never need to grow up. So they no longer have arms or legs. They just have a face. And the face is so engaging. Everything about this face is designed to make sure that you keep poking and prodding it and smiling into it. And if you take a look at a young person looking down at their brand new selfie on their phone, you can easily imagine that what they're holding is an infant. Okay, so that's one time through our loop. Now let's go back and show how the same kind of things happened with another tech type, one that's similar, information. This is IT, right? IT as of 1618. Fab from the Netherlands is here on the call, and I won't have him read this, but I'll just point out that there's a lot of words on this page. The focus of this broadsheet, the first of its kind, a breakthrough, was to give people as much as possible, as fresh as possible, right? Give me the latest information, you know, maybe from yesterday, the day before, and give me a lot of it. Shovel it in. And that's what a broadsheet does. So there's really no emergent sense of self. This has just about as little marking of the top as does the phone I showed in the last picture, the little notch at the top, right? barely any sense of which direction is up. And once again, scale goes straight from extra small to 2XL. And you can see the Twin Towers there too. So now we have a designer involved. And the designer is someone who we know, Benjamin Franklin. He purchased this paper, but he took it forward a great deal. And he was intent upon branding and making sure people knew it was his paper. So he gave it a head, okay? There's clearly more of a sense of knowing where the top of this is. There's no doubt there's even more words on this page than there were back in Amsterdam. Clearly it's an improvement, just like with the PDP-11, but there's starting to be the sense of an actual shape to this thing. This is an emergent self. 1982, this is the first time that we'll take a look at the Times of London. And it's really remarkable to see what will happen when we get to the next slide. So this looks like the kind of newspaper that we might have grown up with. Certainly there's a lot here. There's a sense that each column can do different kinds of things. There's a differentiation of function. There's a table of contents down here at the bottom. There's actually an ad on the page. There's a face, a photo, black and white photo, right? That is all above the fold, because this paper does have a part which is above the area where it's folded in half, and then the part which is below. So it would be kind of hidden from use on top of the stack of newspapers, right? So this is a mature self, and it's clearly adult schema. Now, in the effort to survive, the Times of London made some pretty aggressive moves. 2015, the Times. Neatinous, crazy neatinous, very minion-like, okay? A lot simpler layout, a lot less functional differentiation in terms of what's on this page. Very bright, very appealing. And notice that now you do clearly have things that are full-sized, things that are large, things that are medium-sized, things that are small, and then extra small. It's become fully diversified in terms of the structure of the page, right? So it doesn't stop there. The ultimate in a neatinous newspaper design, the ultimate in a hypo agent design is one where you really have to keep poking and prodding. And to do that, of course, it has to appeal to you in a way that even the new Times of London with its tabloid format doesn't dare to do, which is to have the kinds of story headings that you see here. Lots of stuff that you really have to look at, including the Ask the Sexpert column, right? So all extremely inviting and attractive clickbait. But another way to think of clickbait is that it is how you build hypo agency, how you keep tending and tending and tending. So what we see here is that life cycle, and you see that the point when designers were primary, preeminent, is a stage. And this has helped me a lot, because as I have folks come to the design masterclass now, and I say, well, where are you at? At what stage are you? The kinds of kind of arc that I've described here helps me inform, what I'm going to say to Caleb in coming in is going to be specific to who he's dealing with and what stage the app is in its life cycle, right? So you're not kind of doing a one size fits all, put more white space and make it more designy, which is just wrong for so many reasons. And so what we really feel is that there's a time for a new set of rules that comprehensively and intelligently deals with the life cycles of apps. And that's what we'd like to show you today. Before jumping into that, I'm going to go to a very simple gloss that helps maybe let you know that there is this notion of a full idea of who is doing what on the side of our patrons, our BOO. But there is a notion of the app itself becoming embodied. Roz mentioned that briefly in her introduction, embodied language and embodied design. So let me speak about that briefly for a moment. Now, this can look like a mistake, right? You might say, well, no, it's what is your app? The app is not alive. And I can see that argument. But the fact is, if you are, if you've come to report a sexual assault at the police department and you're brought into a room where there is a detective who is ready to take your statement, and you're sitting in a chair, maybe like the one in front of the PDP-11, and there's the detective on the other side of a desk, and in between you is a large computer facing them. Well, you're going to think that that computer is kind of like someone else who is going to be listening, because the detective's typing into it, you know? You're glad the door is closed, but it seems like your information is spilling right out through the fingers on her keyboard, right? The detective's typing away. The notion that Caleb was speaking of the form factor of an iPad is even more than that. It's the fact that any of these devices, the iPad itself, your app, are seen by the people who use it as kind of alive. It's just a fact. You can't get around it. Anyone who's read Daniel Kahneman and Adam Tversky and their discussions of the default mode will know that we spend so much time socially interpreting the world that not only will we see faces in the clouds, but we will see those same faces in your app. It's going to happen, so you might as well use that fact. If you have a hard time putting a name on who your app is, I'd suggest that maybe you have more than one app. That you actually do not have a single function or a single character. That can happen, right? It could be more than one. That's okay. Factor it carefully and tell me if it's going to be one of these three categories. Is the app simply your tool? Now, I think for most of us in my generation, this will be our default choice. Is it more like your co-pilot, your wingman, your trusted assistant? Is it Robin to your Batman? Or perhaps is it you with a superpower added? In other words, it really is kind of a tool, you know, like a ladder or a hammer, but is it actually perhaps something that is so amazing that every time you use it, you really feel kind of, well, super heroic, very, very powerful. Three choices here, but I want to point out that the first and the third are really you. And when I'm saying you now, I'm not talking about a group of FileMaker developers. I'm talking about you as the consumer and the patron, our BOO, the person we're designing for, right? The tool should be just like you. The superpower should be like you would be with superpower. And your sidekick should have a consistent personality, just like you would expect Robin to act. Right? Just like you want your trusted sidekick to be. Your app must have character. It should be in character in the sense that there should not be contradictions in the way that it acts. So yes, it's a ladder, but it has some living aspect to it. It has some sense even of agency itself, if it's a really good tool. So all of this leads to a really simple rule of thumb, a heuristic that can, in a pinch, it can replace all other design rules. And so what would you pay for such a thing? At the beginning of the call, someone, who was it who was, there were some talk about doing mail order. What would you pay for such a rule? Well, I mean, look, it's got to be so valuable that we have to make it a little bit obscure. So here it is in code. This is a rule that I see, first of all, popularized through the writings of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic, in which he said it in the following way. He said, find someone who you really, really trust, admire, a wish to emulate, someone who you think has the qualities that you would like to have yourself, and act like them. What would they do? Now, the most common formulation of these that we see these days is WWJD. What would Jesus do, for Christians who wish to emulate Jesus? I'm suggesting that this rule is one that you use in evaluating your apps as the simplest and first heuristic to say, okay, my app is a broker. My app is the Airbnb or Uber of whatever, right? I'm building an app that's going to be a trusted broker of services among a wide number of people in the population. Therefore, my question has to be, is my app acting like the kind of trusted broker who I'd like to hire, right? Or if my app is supposed to be a superpower of finance to kind of just make me make better decisions about investing. Well, then in that case, that is me with superpowers. So I say, well, when I have superpowers, is it going to feel like this? Is it going to be like this? Will I act this way? So you have a heuristic to evaluate any app in a super simple formulation. Now, I'm not saying that covers everything, and it's kind of good because we have 10 rules to show you today that take things a little bit more down the line. And let me go ahead and switch to that now. Oh, no, wait, yeah, there we go. There we go. So I'm very proud to show you basically 4 columns and 7 rows of rules that are the result of work from Susan and our team. Susan leading us to this point very ably. And let me just speak a little bit about the structure before we jump in and look at each rule individually. First of all, I want to point out that there are 5 facets along the left: selves, forming, stage set, the tell, and opening. Those are present in not only every app, but everything that we build, every piece of furniture, every car, every coffee machine. They're even always emerging in the plants and animals that we domesticate. You will see them everywhere. The row on top, becoming and unfolding, are kind of meta rules, and they show how these columns fit together, how they repeat. So you can see self, same, rhyme over scale and time. In other words, use the same rule over again. We're not speaking about these today. We're going to concentrate on these 2 columns and the 5 in the middle in terms of the quant, the person who developed that broadsheet. It's so great that the first broadsheet was developed in the Netherlands. I mean, Amsterdam has just got such an amazing cultural contribution to our world in terms of folks figuring out, how to make things happen better in groups, right? And so you can see this guy saying, wait, I need to get more information out to more people more quickly. What if I made this broadsheet, right? That was a quant. That was a quant who did that. And the person who figured out how to do the very first, the design of the ENIAC, these were quants. These are people who were looking to maximize or minimize some quantity, right? So we all on this call, I think everyone on this call has some element of quant in us. Susan and I identify as quants first, with an emergent sense of design coming afterwards. I, as a person who was extremely clumsy and just socially bumbling for most of my early life, was kind of a classic geeky, nerdy guy, which often goes with being a quant. Quants don't often get the social aspect of things too easily. You know what I mean? And then designers. Designers are folks who may have found out how to deal with the social aspect and may become very, very adept at doing things that make other folks do things better. But there is a notion that a designer is often in control. They have a sense of the user, but apparently you can know enough about the problems with design to know that this term user, remember the same name used to describe drug addicts, has been accepted and even grown in prominence over 30 years, right? So designer does not have that full view of the world that we might think that we do when we're in design mode. And so this time through the rules, we try and tweak the rules in a way that makes sense for what a designer needs to hear. This is speaking to the quant, this to the designer. What you will not see is the columns for teamwork and craft, but I'm hoping that we can show those very, very soon. My timing is impeccable. Uncanny, how am I doing this? Okay. So rule 1 is to simply acknowledge that what you're making is a little self. It's a mini me. Think of yourself, first of all, as you're building whatever you're building, but especially these days with apps, that you are Geppetto, and you hope that your Pinocchio will grow up to be a real boy. It's true that my daughter and goddaughter are doing a great job at SmallCo, doubling our income and transforming processes in a way that the old man never could, but they have a secret weapon. Little Dominic is a productivity dynamo, as you can see here. He's there because he's imitating his aunt, who is helping to raise him. This is her bed, that's her computer, and he's doing his version of exactly what she does. So this is his rule that whatever you're making is going to be seen as some kind of self. So get used to it and use that to your advantage. Next, that you really have to design to make sure that people can tell where the front is. You remember what happened from the ENIAC to the PDP-11, that you can clearly see where you could sit down in front of the thing and start typing on that terminal, right? This rule, it seems very simple and seems like it might be a no-brainer, but that's not true, because all the people at Apple have brains, and Steve Jobs had a brain, but he still designed the hockey punk mouse, which when you look at it, you can kind of tell the top or front, but not when you hold it in your hand. Stage set is the next area here. And what we're saying at this moment is frame and then fit. Build a simple stage set that will support the action that will happen in your app, right? Fit the stage to our story. And in this case, our is us, your boo. Map life to that stage and don't add stuff. I just want to point out, as many of you have already recognized the set for I Love Lucy, the classic sitcom. And so here is the nightclub. This is where Ricky's the band plays. And then here's the kitchen and of the apartment. Here's the apartment itself. Here is the bedroom with the iconic twin beds. And then here is the nursery that was added a little bit later for little Ricky. Now, you would think, how could all this action happen right here? And there were a couple times when a camera was out and about, But the truth is they didn't even need all of these. Like, I don't know, 80% of the action, 90% maybe, happened in these two. And so the idea is here, you need a stage set for what you're doing, but don't think that there's necessarily something smarter than just using a hamburger button and using some list views. They're very, very powerful. It's not a place for creativity, but it is a place to try to map enough of the reality of their lives to say, yeah, we can tell a story with the living room and the kitchen. And if you can, then use that. Don't add stuff. Occam's razor. All right. Maybe the single most important rule of interaction design is this one. In the past, I would have said object verb. So you, first of all, you point at the folder and then you drag it to the trash. So object verb does explain it, but there is actually a better term that describes the grammar of sign language, and that is topic comment. And so first of all, you are not expressing any abstraction without expressing the things or people or places that it applies to. Remember forgiveness? How beautifully it floated in the air all by itself with no forgiver and no forgiven in sight, right? So don't do that. Instead, go ahead and first of all point out what's the topic, what it is that we're dealing with, and then afterwards say what's going to happen. Object, verb, topic, comment. Finally, we're on the fifth rule. So opening. Make sure there is a clear place for us. Now, my grandson, he went inside this box. He got one of his stools. He set it up for him to sit in. And then he went and got another stool and unfolded it next to it. He patted it, made sure it was in good position. And then he invited my daughter in, his aunt. This is the one that he's working like with his fingers flying over the computer. So what you're doing is you're making a place for us, your boo. You're making a place for us to do our work, considering what you know about us, right? The focus is on us, our work, and our stories. So if a quant is able to follow these 5 rules, we will have gone a long way towards solving the kinds of problems that come up in the work of quants. But our work is not done because of the problems that come from designers themselves. So you see, our time goes until when? This is 3:05 in Miami, time for a café con leche.
Albert, you've got about another 45 minutes.
Cool, doing good. Okay, so there is a photo that I first had for Ferdinand Porsche's 1939 VW Bug. It's a classic of design. It is amazing, you know, maybe right up there with the Fiat Cinquecento. But Porsche's Volkswagen Bug has become so strong because of a designer, but not only because of the designer. And so what I wanted to do here is to make sure that we do not focus on him as a kind of a design genius. I would say one of the real problems in the design world today is the fetishization of design and the idolatry of designers. I mean, it's kind of like we've gone back to the days of you know, history by the great men, or you know, busts of Beethoven on the piano. You know, what Porsche did is he built in a way that mapped onto the interests of this little boy, this man. And if you think of it, probably this house is even looking at the car. Doesn't it look like that in this picture? In other words, when we love this vehicle, it's because it responds to something in us that we are prepared to respond to in the same way that we respond to a child. right? And so the fact is, you know how it is. You could have, oh, I don't want to pick on, okay, you could have had, let's say, I don't know, an 8 or 10-year-old K car, Chrysler K car of years back in a junkyard. Remember the one with this kind of very geometric sharp edges, and not looking so good. Or you could have had right next to it a 40 or 50-year-old VW bug, a Beetle. Which one is the person going to choose to restore? The one that calls to them. And I want you to understand that call, when that rusted out hulk of a Beetle is calling out to the person in the junkyard, that is hypo agency. That's some power. That's some shit going on there, right?
It's also the one.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's also the one that has a movie. It's the main character in a movie.
Right, exactly. I mean, how many cars have that? We visited, our team visited Istanbul, and we were at Hagia Sophia. And of course, this was Santa Sophia. This was the church of the Eastern Orthodox, of Eastern Orthodoxy. And then it became a mosque. And then it was decommissioned as a mosque. And somehow this building had enough power to make them recommission it. It's a mosque again. And even over the 40 years when it was not officially a mosque, the presence of this building was so overwhelmingly compelling that the muezzin continued to sing from its minarets every night. And these are buildings that clearly have a life, and things that can, even in the case of an old rusted out Beetle, it's a power that allows things to come back from the dead. So how does this happen? It doesn't come from being some celebrated god, some Beethoven of design. There's a specific way in which it happens, and that's what this rule deals with. Face them. Show who and how they are. And them and they is the thing that you're making, okay? Specify my pronouns here. Create selves and signs that tell us who they are and what they're willing to do for us. I mean, you can really clearly see in this picture that this boy is like, hey, the car can take us downtown for a ride, right? It says that, and it can take you in safety and comfort with big windows where you can see the stuff that you're driving past, right? So I want you to pay a special attention to the 3 last words in this rule. They're focused towards us as designers. The them is the thing that you're making. It's not you, right? One of the biggest challenges for designers is to get over themselves. We tend to think highly of ourselves. We go on a bit, not that I've ever done that, but I'm talking about other people. And so we have to make sure that we are paying close attention to what the whole context is calling for, all the people around, and not put our ideas in front, at least not if we are looking to do something as great as what Porsche did here with this car. Next, the rule here is fit to task from warehouse to workbench. I want to take some time with this one. You may have recognized the screenshot is the brand new app library. I know everyone said, but we need a 5th kind of extra home screen on our iPhones. Apple heard us. They heard our cry from the wilderness, and they supplied us with yet another screen that we can swipe to. This is one that you can, appropriately enough, you have to swipe left a bunch of times, which is, of course, the universal sign for delete. This is, if the other screens were sheep, this is the goats of these screens. So keep swiping left on your phone and you'll find this one. So the rule is as follows: fit to task from warehouse to workbench, sorting by type. Hey, it happens at first, but eventually it gives way always gives way to sorting by task. Types are for you, dear designer. You like that. Tasks are for us. So it's a design thing to focus on sorting things by type, to put them in neat categories. It's the way libraries are organized, the way supermarkets are organized, the way a Home Depot is organized. But you need to actually get back to the workbench, get back to the kitchen, and maybe sit at a nice dining room table before you can truly get the fruits of your labor, right? So this design was yet another attempt to solve the problem of burgeoning and messy screens of app icons on the phone. And so what happens with this, I think maybe we'll hear about that a little bit later, is that it ends up focusing on abstract categories that really have nothing to do with getting work done. Rigging, blocking to support the story. Embody your work with heft and momentum. And I can tell you that you do feel that when you're crossing this bridge. My team leader, Karina, and my wife and Dominic and I crossed this bridge 2 weeks ago. And it's in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And yeah, when you cross it, you feel like you're crossing something. It's a wonderful, rumbling, amazing thing. Use entasis. This is the swelling of Roman columns at the bottom. Greek columns did it before them. And Foley art. This is the notion that comes first of all from radio with the sound effects guy, and has gone way beyond that in today's movies. So the work feels and sounds real. So we call this rigging. The term is taken from character rigging, which is what's used in today's animation. You create a character rig for someone like Moana to define how Moana will move. 2 more. The tell. Voice them. The telltale thing. Designer, be quiet. Instead, let your work speak for itself. With language and register, stance and gaze. Now, I am an Airbnb superhost, but I don't like the Airbnb app. Airbnb is so focused on design that they make so many mistakes. They need this column, and I'm looking forward to sending it to them. If this were an Airbnb cup, there would have been a button before it that says drink, and you would have clicked the button and then had choices of things to drink. And then you would get the coffee, and then they would check to see if it's too hot. You may have to fill out a form afterwards with your responses. Then they carefully tabulate your responses to make sure they made you a better cup next time. How much better for this cup, which is so sensual, especially to a coffee drinker. I almost need a trigger warning on this for coffee addicts, because yeah, you just want to kind of grab that handle and drink it and feel the warm cup in your hand. The design is brilliant. It's not over the top in your face, but very, very, very powerful. Last one. When we saw this rule before, it was a matter of the box, leaving a place in the box to invite his aunt in. So this is, I think it's an animation that captures the moment when Freddie Mercury had the crowd singing after him, call and response in Wembley Stadium. Jump in, invite us 3 ways, make work that's shaped and scaled to us, let us fit in, sing along, and step up. So let's go back to Quant. Remember, this was the box. So Quants, yes, people kind of like to have places for them. And now by the time we get to the designer, we have 3 different ways that we can get them in. So we're trying to get a little bit subtler about what we're doing. And when we are back on Quant with the tell, the notion was simply topic, comment, the object, and then the action that follows. And then we got to the point where we were in the design column speaking about subtleties such as the register and the stance and gaze of the object. For designers speaking about stage set, we were already speaking about some rather subtle things such as entasis and Foley art. But when we spoke to the quants, we said, look, just have a place for stuff to act, for things to happen, a place that makes sense, right? Forming, we had some subtleties for the designer about sorting by task instead of by type. When we were speaking to the quant, it was a matter of just very simply make sure you know which way is up, where's the top, right? And then back to selves. We assume that designers do know how to make selves and know something about how to create faces and how to communicate. But for the quants, we just had to remind them, hey, this thing is going to be interpreted as a self, so be ready. So these are the 10 rules that we're now going to attempt to apply to Mia's iPhone screen. That I think
those are just, I wanted to point out that these are just 10 of the rules that we have, but there's so much more to them. And we are looking forward to sharing this with you in the near future, hopefully.
What else did I forget, Roz? Because it feels like I went way too fast.
No, you were right on time. And I think everything is pretty much, we're covering every base. And maybe we can just recap real quick while the guys are getting ready there to demo the iOS. As we can see here, we definitely gravitate towards app with a warm personality and become second nature to us. Apps that give us superpowers and make us feel at home by considering not just our goals, but also our needs and emotions. So what we just went through is a way to share the principles, right? That will help you carefully construct the behavior of your app with this in mind.
Thanks, Roz. Susan, at some point, if we have a few moments, which I think we might, I'm hoping you'll talk about vacuum cleaners in your life. Are you still there, Susan?
I could do that if you want.
Let's maybe let Fob do this and then bring in the vacuum cleaners, and then I think we'll open to questions. Okay, Fob, can you go ahead and start the demos of iOS examples? Many of these are from the actually from the most recent iOS update. So Fob swiped right. Okay, remember way back in ancient scripture, going actually before Jewish scriptures. On the right-hand side was the good stuff, and the left was the bad. I think that may be the case with these screens. So you swipe right, and that means you like this, right? You're not rejecting it, and there is a screen. That's one. Okay, now could you swipe from upper left? Notifications. Swipe up, and then swipe from the upper right. And there's a quick get access to the control panel. And then there is putting your finger in the center of the screen and swiping down. And you can see the problem. Isn't it apparent to all of us that there are simply not enough extra screens to find on this phone. So that's right, swipe left, no. Swipe left, left. I need more. And there it is, the app library. Here's. I don't want to let anyone necessarily defend this thing because I hate it so much. But of course, we have strong opinions. We weirdos from Planet Design. Roz, you had a comment about how this thing was put together. What did you say?
Yeah, when I see the app library, for me, it's just like going to this to the store, right? And okay, so I know where to find the cereals in aisle 1, and then the milk is all the way down there in aisle 6 or something. So that's the app library for me. It's I see that you're storing everything by type, but it's not really useful for me for when I have to actually do something, get something done. Like for example, I used to work at an agency where I was working with social media and content and all that. And in order to do that, using the app library would be such a hassle. I would just have to start looking for every app that I need to create the content and do the work of actually publishing.
Is there anybody else who has yet tried to drag things in and out of the app library? Because it looks just like the ones where you can drag things in and out. It has the identical affordance, yet of course you can. And it maybe gives you the impression you're going to be able to delete it, but you're actually going to delete the entire app. Guys, look, as far as I'm concerned, this is a really, really lousy example of stage set. So on my screen here where I'm pointing to, we're talking about this rule here, Occam's razor. This is totally gratuitous. It's a mess. And I don't see any sign of it stopping, you know? And I do get a sense of a company where they're super sure of themselves because they're designers, right? And so they have been unchallenged, which is really why I'm hoping this column can be the kind of missile that can penetrate the bunker of design arrogance. It's way, way, way too much. Way too much. How about
the message drawer?
Messages. Yeah, why don't we take a look at messages? Can you find the thread with multiple recipients? Do you have that set up, Fob? Fob, I think your microphone is off. Do you have the thread with multiple recipients?
Sorry, Albert, we don't have the thread.
With multiple.
Okay, I'm going to describe something, and maybe you guys have already found it on your phone. Those of you who are using iPhones in the audience, you go ahead and you take a look at your phone and see some of your multiple threads, right? So, okay, here is one. Let me see if I can turn on my screen momentarily and do this. I can't see. Oh, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see what I'm sharing. Are you guys seeing my phone right now?
Yes.
Okay, so what we have is if there is a chat with multiple recipients, like this one right here, now the head for it, the face of it, that thumbnail, now has multiple faces in it. And the one that is largest is actually the person who spoke last. So here is Enid, Kiki, and Jana talking about a marketing slick, I think was the last message in that. The size of the thumbnails inside this composite thumbnail now show that sense. So what we usually talk about when we speak about faces is that faces do two things, ID and state. Okay, if we want to use terms that are more like what happens with human faces, you'd say, who is it and how are they feeling? You know, what's going on with them right now, right? So you identify the chat quickly as a multi-user, multi-tenant chat, and then you see who is posted most recently with the larger head inside. So this actually does a couple rules. Let me turn my camera back off. And then what we're speaking of here is face them, right? First of all, of course, it's a mini me. It's a little picture of my two daughters in there, right? Shows who and how they are. This is ID and this is state, right? What's going on with them right now. Another rule that's present here is down here with the enfolding self-same, which I said we're not going to get to, because you kind of recursively use the same design at the next level down. Now, this is the important reason why you want to have levels in your app that include such things as extra small, small, medium, large, XL, 2XL, because it means you can take the same design approaches and use them in the same way across the levels. Of course, what Apple did is they used the same design element, like their little folder, their bundle of apps. Can you go back and show that, Fob? You had a folder with multiple apps in it. Right, look at the graphic there of the gray. With the
We're not hearing it anymore, Albert, to your Skype screen. We're not seeing it.
Oh. Hold on. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, once again, please, can you open up that photo editing one? So once again, these are kind of things that would be that would not be grouped together so much over in the app library. Here, you've got to create this. You can fully control this. Look at the graphic appearance. And now go ahead and close that and swipe left a bunch of times to get to. And this is the same appearance, yet you cannot work it in the same fashion, right? So it's a violation of the self-same rule. Okay, next I think we had.
I actually shared in the chat a screenshot of the example that we were just talking about when it comes to messages and group messages and how the new iOS looks.
Thank you, Rose.
You're welcome.
Oh, look, there's a call at the top. Take a look. I'm going to look at that. First of all, Fob is getting a call. Do you see it, guys? This is pretty cool. I like this one a lot. Of course, probably when you start to talk, when you guys talk, you're going to have different opinions. But look at this. What would have happened before the last update is that inbound call would have taken over the whole screen. It would have been completely modal, right? And forced you to respond to it. Now, Fob has that call coming in, and he can choose to deal with it or not, but he can still look at the rest of his screen at the same time. Also, if you chose to speak to Siri, and let's say you were asking for Siri to add up a series of numbers, which is one thing that Siri is very good at. So you can say, what's 348 plus 1,219 plus 400 plus this, and go on and on and on. What used to happen is that when you evoked Siri, the screen holding the numbers you hope to say would be completely covered. Now that no longer happens. Now what does not happen anymore is you do not get a chance to see what Siri is hearing and check your numbers coming up on the screen. So there are balances, trade-offs. But all of these are a matter of augmenting the stage set. So it's a matter of this rule here, again, stage set. And the tell is present as well, in that it's sitting there and offering to you mildly, quietly, without taking over, what can be done. You could answer this call now, but you don't have to. And you don't even have to hang up on it, right? Because that's the way you used to have to deal with it. If you wanted your screen back, you'd have to hang up. Guys, what were our other examples? Did we get through them all? I know we've gone back. I'm sorry?
We had topic comment, an example.
Yeah, we do that with, let's go to the clock and alarms. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you remember, Albert showed the grabbing a file and putting it into trash as topic comment. So topic or subject is the file, you select it, and then you perform the action, you throw it into trash. And what they have done here with the new update in the alarms, they basically make you hit the action first. So you need to, if you click, so if you click just on your alarm, if I was now clicking on 7 and 4 o'clock, you can't do anything. So you have to hit edit top left, and only then you can go and edit your alarm. So that's reverse to the topic comment, right? That's comment topic. But then there is also a way to do a topic comment flow, and that is if you swipe to the left on the alarm, you get the chance to delete the button, to delete the alarm, sorry. So we have like an example and a counterexample within the same app.
Right. Modes, of course, I mean, they can be helpful because people are familiar with them. They've happened, and you can even think of yourself as being in cleanup mode, right? But they're just simply not as intuitive as a direct topic comment object action syntax. I think that was all of ours. Did we have one more? Have I forgotten one?
No, or if I'm
no,
sorry.
go ahead, guys.
I wanted to say that if anyone here present has also noticed something that reminds you of one of the rules that you just heard, you're more than welcome to share.
I think this is probably the time to open it up, and I've got a couple minutes left here in our time. So, what do you think? Who should I turn it back to? Barry? Or do I just address the crowd directly? Do you have some things? Oh, Fob, you should probably stay on so that we can. That's all right.
Yeah, Albert, if you stop sharing your screen, we can get the gallery view back.
Will do.
All right.
Albert, do you want me to have the screen sharing back on? Is that what you asked me?
Oh, now that you've closed it, maybe someone wants to share their screen and show something. Any comments that, look, let's throw it wide open just so we can get whatever anyone wants to share with us. I want to tell you that we are very anxious to hear your thoughts at length. There are brilliant people on this call, people who I admire and who I've been proud to call as friends and colleagues, and anything that you have to offer us, and you can we're tough skinned, give it to us as hard as we need it. You can let us know back channel. You can email me, albert@smallco.net. But if anyone wants to kind of bring any kind of comment, maybe what you have right now is an example where you're wondering how the rules would apply to it, or maybe you just have a comment for us. We're glad to hear it.
Albert, when you were talking about the levels of design that you want to repeat at higher and lower levels, you want to repeat the similar designs. The word that came to me was fractal, that it's kind of a fractal application of your design, that you want to put it at different levels.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't know if I interrupted you, Lynn. Was there more to the comment? Because that was our intent, and this is part of the way that you make sure that you can address people at different levels and apps at different levels, and have something appropriate to say at every level in their growth.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very fractal about the structure of the columns, the way it is recursively returned, and then the way the two meta levels have things apply at different levels. So yes, that's very much intentional, and thank you for noticing that.
The other thing is, of course, I'm very interested in semiotics and the use and application of the icons or other signaling systems. So people talk about overuse of icons. And of course, the icon management is part of what you're getting with all your home screens there. Where do you see that evolving to?
Boy, I don't know. I think it's probably, at this time, it's clear that people are taking very different points of view, right? There is enough of an ecosystem happening now that the evolution of these ideas is no longer, I say, thank God, is no longer going to be directed by Apple. I think it's well beyond them. And to their credit, I mean, there was a step that was taken. If you were to look at the life cycle of any of these practices as tech becomes craft, there is a time when it becomes supported simply by the community. And so look at the challenge that Apple has. They want to build a platform, and so does Android, right? And they want to make it open, relatively speaking. And the more successful they are at doing that, and the more things that people can offer to their booze to get done, well, then the more apps there will be, right? It's a tough one. It's tough to figure out. I think it may just be at a certain moment in terms of those screens that it's just going to kind of collapse. And I would say that what's likely to happen more and more is that you will go to, look what happened with Spotlight in the Finder, okay? What Spotlight is the equivalent of a command line, right? It's no longer see and point, it's no longer directly, it's just say call for it. And certainly you can do that on the phone now. And one way to deal with that problem is to say, open this app, right? Call for it and have it come up as long as you remember what it's called. But there are going to be a lot of interesting approaches to that, I think, as time goes by.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Albert, I have a couple of comments.
Ready.
Okay, first of all, thank you for this. It's been fascinating. Second of all, I think the app library, which I agree with you on all counts about its utility, except for the one thing that it was created for, which was to solve a problem that I don't think they anticipated, which was, the massive explosion of icons on all of our screens. And I'm the first one to admit that I have icons on my screen that I probably haven't touched in years. And I tend to just buy the highest capacity iPhone I can afford. And, just because I can't deal with it, And so for me, the app library is, it's number one, the thing that's very hard to anticipate in your design process is the misuse of the thing that you design. And then, as far as a temporary solution to that problem, I think that Apple did what they had to do. I don't think there was an easier answer to that problem that they could deploy quickly.
Let me ask you this, Bob. Apple has unilaterally decided to remove apps from your phone. And so that when you see them there, they're not really there. You have to re-download them, right? And it's doing that based upon an algorithm, which is based upon recency of use, right? And also, whether the thing's been updated. It is already taking apps off of your phone. It's not significantly changing its representation of what it's doing, right? Which is another classic Apple, right? And the honest approach to this whole thing would be to say, you're not using this stuff. May we remove it? I think what's likely to come is there's going to be more of a polite, I used to talk about good waiters, like a really, really good waiter in a good restaurant, where the phone, not when you're doing something else, not at the moment that you picked it up to do something that you already had in mind, but at a quiet moment when you're just finishing a task, it puts up something, I could help you clean up your phone. The first thing, which is rather unsubtle, is it has to find out when that right moment is. It's something that a good waiter has no problem doing, but phones are completely inept at finding the right moment to interrupt you with something else, right? I mean, the whole notion of the fact that the incoming call doesn't take over is a massive improvement there. But if there were a way for it to say, you know what, honestly, it would be a great thing to Apple to say, honestly, we've already kind of been offloading this stuff. What if we just go ahead and remove it? How would that be? I don't know. It means kind of asking rather than just, and that's hard.
Yeah, well, it's, we rarely have the timing of just about any software-driven device to ask a question at the right time is just probably one step above when your smoke alarm battery alert decides to start chirping, which is inevitably going to be the absolute worst time that it could do it. And and I think that's the answer to Lynn's question about what comes next. I think that what comes next is more intelligence. I think the AI aspects of computer interfaces has to leap forward in a very big way in order for us to find much more utility beyond the paradigms that we already have.
Right now, you kind of turn on or off talking, right? Can the thing talk back to you or no? It's a kind of just a binary choice. If there comes a time when the phone can be more clever and more graceful about when it does it, then the thing that happens is that the audio channel cannot get jammed as quickly as the video. In other words, your visual field on that phone gets jammed up very, very quickly. The number of things you can choose from is some number in the dozens on a screen. But the number of things that the phone could choose to tell you or ask you, or the things you could tell it, can number in the tens of thousands. And so the notion of it is that, it's likely that we're going to do more through speaking and listening than through visual.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on this deleting of apps on the phone. I love it. It was solved first. Apple had a problem with people's phones getting filled up with apps and having no memory. But then, you ask if you want to delete an app, that's almost traumatic. Well, I don't want to delete it. I might want it again. And this solution of Apple of like things that you don't really use, taking them off and helping you solve the problem of a full phone without traumatizing you with deleting the app forever and then getting it back with all of its data, I thought was a really elegant solution to a problem that understood this trauma of getting rid of something you have to then go find again. I like it.
I don't think they have easy choices, but I'm just suggesting right now there's kind of two ways of representing what's going on with those icons. Yeah. Are they there or not there? And
it could be, they could have a visual indication of ones that aren't quite there. And my big problem is I've got 7 or 8 screens with all these apps. I have no idea where an app I use infrequently lives. I just search for it. I'd love to have a way to be able to find it and group it, but I don't feel like bothering, to go through the screen. So they have real management issues there, but I do like this solution they've done.
Well, it's interesting.
I'm not sure. I think I just dropped out. This is Anton. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. I have one crazy thing that I did. I mean, I was one of those wacko people who Ada wants to jump in and contribute too. I was one of the people who had your curated folders and everything off to 2 screens, and I had a whole protocol for it. But I actually kind of jumped in with the new OS, and I agree, I don't like the app library. But what I did was I replaced 2/3 of my home screen with Siri suggestion icons, because I was thinking that maybe the algorithm can help me a little bit and be that good waiter that you were referring to, Albert. And I've been on that for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, however long iOS 14's been out. And I have to say that at first it was very disconcerting because I couldn't find my apps. And so I had to, do some searching and do that. But then because it's remembering when I did it and what I was doing, and I think it does it against, time of day and location, that now it's actually gotten better. I've found myself doing less and less searching because the machine is becoming a better and better waiter. And I think, you know, I want to hear more about where you think things are going next, but I just wanted to at least comment on that part of it, and that, you know, I kind of like, it was traumatic for the first day because I was like, where are my apps? But being able to then go back and find them, or have it present them to me, like, you know, like in the evening, you know, it's presenting to me like, you know, cooking apps and apps that run the lights in the house and things like that. But like in the morning, it's presenting me Zoom and other things like that. And I mean, I think that, you know, the fact that it's doing that, and then actually I found it doing like a weird thing, which I didn't even realize, was that when I went to go pick up my son from preschool, it was presenting me with like Grubhub and Postmates and things like that, because sometimes I'd be like panicked because we're late and having to order food. And so it's starting to learn a little bit, and I thought that was a really interesting, you know, thing that I just discovered. I'm not sure, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to at least comment on that idea of the good waiter.
Anton, you're speaking about the swipe right screen, which I don't even know what its current name is. Is that right?
I'm not talking about swipe right. I'm talking about, you can have on your home screen, you can have widgets on the home screen. And so if you can imagine your original,
Is that right?
What's that?
The one that's hiding off to the left. So you
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like on the main home screen, you can drop in widgets. And I don't have an easy way to, let me see if I can do this super fast without taking up everyone's time. So here's my home screen, right?
I've got it.
So there's my home screen, for those of you can see my screen. And so right now, you know, there's the bottom and there's the top. And so the bottom two rows, if I were to try to modify the screen, hold on one second. If you guys can see the jiggling, the two bottom rows are Siri suggestion widgets that I put on the main screen. And so the algorithm is trying to be that good waiter. I simply was, I'm jumping on that. Was looking for a good term versus saying the machine or the algorithm, but Albert, I'm simply, the thrust of my comment was that term of phrase, the good waiter, is really brilliant. And I think that, you know, I'm not sure if this is the only implementation of it that's existing, but I mean, I found it to be one that, you know, frankly, for a couple of weeks, it's been working for me. And it's been one of those things that I've been talking to my clients about, you know, in terms of like, you know, where the puck is going. Not so much in terms of your phone, but like, you know, having the machine show some intelligence about what you want, and trying to present that a little bit more up front. And when I was playing with the widgets and everything, that was something that jumped out at me, and I decided to jump in, because let me see if I can show you guys this really quick. If I can turn them on. Like, for example, if I turn on one of my old folders, so I used to have a home screen, and I used to have like a million folders that I hand curated, you know, where I had them just so, because I think it was Roz that was making the point of like, well, I wouldn't be able to find anything if I didn't have it all in the right folder. But, and this is, I just never deleted this one, but then I would have that, and then I would have whatever ones I put on the main thing, right? I mean, this is the original one that I've updated, but before I would have, you know, 24 that I handpicked saying these are, you know, as you would say, Albert, above the fold. And then I had, you know, these other ones that were sort of below the fold. But, and the whole point is that it was traumatic for me to let go of that. But I mean, but the fact is it has becoming the good waiter, and it seems to be working for me so far. Ask me in a month and maybe I'll feel differently.
It also takes a lot of time to manage that. And in addition, I found just pulling down from the top and searching, or like if I'm looking for settings, I'll go into settings, pull down, snag the search bar, type in the module that I want, the control panel I want, and I can get right to it very quickly. Trying to use icons is just, to me, is pointless.
I had this amazing experience this week. Safari disappeared from my bottom menu, and I couldn't find Safari anywhere. I asked Siri to find Safari. She couldn't find it. I had to, you know, go Google it, and they had to give me all these instructions. And so the only way I could get Safari back is I had to reset my home screen entirely in order to get it back on. So that triggered this whole process where I just realized I had, you know, hundreds of apps that I never use because I could never find them. So I've now reorganized my whole apps into like life area functionality. I don't like the folder thing because you never know what's in your folder, and you also have panes within the folders to know what's in there. So now I just have all my finance apps, all my food apps, all my health and wellness apps, all my utility apps, all my regular apps. And they're on all at each screen. And now it's like I can use them, and I know more what's on my phone, and it's like open up all these more possibilities for me to take advantage of my apps.
I mean, I feel that Apple needs basically a computer-based app, a Mac-based app to help organize the, all of the apps on the phone. And that's been missing because, as Bob said, it's way too difficult to go through and find things and drag them around and put them into folders. Kind of need a helper app for that. And I could even see an app on the main screen that was like a list that you'd scroll through of the names of all the folders on the iPhone, and then you would pick the folder that you want. So it didn't matter what screen it was on, but you could then go directly to it. So if you have something for travel, maybe it has Expedia in it and Travelocity and hotels.com, you just scroll on that list that opens up and pick your folder and then pick your app, and would be more fluid than searching through the entire system for it.
Well, and I think all of this illustrates Apple's problem that they're dealing to so many different types of people that think differently, and relate in different ways to their phone and how they want to use it. And they're kind of throwing a kitchen sink out there, it feels like. If you like the list view, if you think this way, if you think that way, which almost seems appropriate because people access information and organize their life on their phone in different ways.
Well, I kind of come at this as an outsider because I will admit I do not have a smartphone. I have an iPad, but my phone is strictly for making phone calls, and most of the time it's turned off. So I'm wondering, why isn't there some simple voice command to bring up an app or bring it to the forefront, that you could speak a name and just have it come up? Why isn't there some kind of navigation for that?
You can do that.
Siri.
Yeah, you just say, "Hey Siri, open Facebook," or whatever. Oh, now it's doing it. But
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
I need to.
I mean, I got to say that I think there's a generational thing here too. We're going to see things shift a lot towards much more, I think, towards speaking to and hearing from our devices over time, because I know that, like, my daughter has no problem talking out loud to her phone and her friends and everything else. It's like there's been this shift in people's opinion about privacy that's generational. And like, for me, I don't want to be out in public and have people hear me talking to my phone. I just don't. I'm not comfortable with it. And I think a lot of people in my age group are the same way. And so this whole idea of talking to your phone to get it to do things for you, as much as I enjoyed and enjoyed the vision of the movie Her, the Joaquin Phoenix movie, Scarlett Johansson, it's kind of dystopian, but there were aspects of that, the fact that his, this OS got to know him so well that it was able to anticipate and meet his needs on many different levels, including a rather inappropriate emotional level. But, just that whole idea of, this is what we want. Ultimately, I think this is what we all want. We want our devices to understand us in a way that they're as good as having like a human valet, that gives us what we need and then anticipates what we need before we even know we need it, right?
Right. Do you remember the Knowledge Navigator video that's about 20 years old?
No.
I do remember the Knowledge Navigator. I used to show that in my classes. Yeah. Didn't turn out that way.
Not yet. Not yet.
Well, Siri shortcuts are great. Like, if I'm walking my dog and I want to do an order at Starbucks, I just, tell Siri to, get my Starbucks order, And then when I go to Starbucks, the order is ready for me. But, you know, that's fun thing to do. But we're starting to use it in FileMaker using Siri shortcuts to enter an order for a client. And, you know, just instead of them having to physically type their order in, we're using it for them to pick their items and enter their order using the Siri shortcuts inside the FileMaker.
I want Siri. I love this idea. But I need Siri to get seriously smarter, seriously quickly. Some of you guys may have noticed that I have a little bit of an accent. Siri cannot understand me. She's never been able to understand me. She's always asking me, I can't remember any examples because she frustrates me so much. For some reason, the algorithm was just not tested on a Southern accent. I have a client who's from Mexico, and he has a lovely accent, which to my ear is heavier than mine. And she understands him perfectly. He can dictate all day long into FileMaker Go, and it's perfect. I try to say the exact same thing. Siri doesn't get it.
There's a wonderfully entertaining video of a Scottish woman trying to get Siri to play a song for her. That expresses all of our frustration sometimes with digital assistants, I think. But when it comes to digital assistants, I don't know what you guys think, but I think Siri is probably one of the dumbest out of all the digital assistants that are out there.
Alexa's seriously dumb. I give her the same command every morning when I get up. Every morning, Siri, play KJZZ, and sometimes I get KCPP or LRDD or whatever. She cannot. It's like, how hard is it? Every day for 2 years, I've been asking her to play KJZZ as soon as I get up.
Did you say Alexa or Siri?
I probably said Siri. I meant Alexa.
Okay.
This is a problem because this is gonna have an effect on our relationship with women.
Exactly. I get frustrated with her.
Oh, you can change it to a man, you know.
Wait a minute, Susan, share your story of the vacuum cleaner. Remember, we had the notion of the embodiment of the design, okay, and these levels of superpower and all this. So please, Susan, tell the story of vacuum cleaners in your life.
Well, I mean, it takes us off topic, but I'm happy.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
I've had strong emotional relationships with more than one vacuum cleaner. So
you're admitting that to 50 people around the whole world.
I know. Well, you guys saw me working out. I thought the video was off. So, you know, what else? What else is there at this point? So my first vacuum cleaner, and this is a generational thing that I
Susan,
remember.
can I ask a question real quick? How long is this going to take?
Well, I'm Southern, but I'll try to talk fast.
What does that mean? Can you give me minutes?
Well, how many do I have? I can probably do.
Well, the meeting's officially over and I have to get on the road, but I'm going to leave the meeting up while I get ready to leave and everything. But if the formal meeting is over with, I will stop recording now and then you guys can talk about anything you want.
Oh, then I can talk in depth about my emotional attachments.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to stop recording now. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah. So